Okay, let's have a smooth start. I would like to introduce to you the broker of the year, 15 times broker of the year at Sedo, Dave Evanson. Actually, he's in his fourth career already. He started out in marketing for financial institutions. He was senior VP marketing for two largest banks in the US back in the 80s. After Dave founded a global marketing consulting firm, he did strategic planning for international companies. He served as president of the company for 20 years. Later, he was independent broker, and we met on a traffic conference in Canada with three other guys, breakfast together, talking about domain names. Dave wanted to broker as well my domain names. The problem was they were at Sedo in an exclusive contract at this time. And well, what happened is that Dave joined Sedo and now he's there for 16 years. Yeah. But on a side note, just that you know whom you are talking to. A few people that used to work for Dave, former president of Discover Card, former president of Visa Credit Card, vice chairman of MasterCard International, senior VP of American Express. So if you have financial domain names, I think the complete Fortune 500 is on your short dial. Okay. Um, Maybe you want to add something to this introduction? Okay, I think there's much more to say, but it might take too long. Yeah, he has been around for a long, long time. So let's start with a few questions, because you are so experienced in that field. Just let me ask you why most salespeople fail to convince buyers to pay a premium price. I remember I sold as well domain names under value, but maybe you can add something to that. Why do they fail, the salespeople or the domainers?
Thanks, Freddy. Well, I think a lot of brokers don't necessarily appreciate the value, sometimes don't appreciate the value of the domain in the mind of the buyer. A motivated buyer will typically spend a lot more money than a non-motivated buyer or buyers at large. And the the inexperienced broker won't necessarily take the time to figure out good comps, look at the history of similar domains. Importantly, look at the potential incremental business the domain can bring to a company, and we'll just try to get a deal done. So won't put that much pressure on raising the price. That's in general, not all brokers, but I see that happen quite a bit. If they do the homework and have strong arguments that are meaningful to the potential buyer, the price will typically go up. But it's a universal problem. It's not as bad as it was 10, 15 years ago before we had all the tools that we have today, valuation models and a lot of history of comparable domains.
Okay, when when you are doing the deal, how do you know that the buyer is ready, that he's ready to sign? Any signals? Because it happens quite often. You have a good chat, and the buyer somehow agrees, and then I keep on talking, and suddenly the deal fails. What are the signals?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and that's something that can be frustrating sometimes. It's typically pretty difficult to know when the buyer is actually ready to sign or to agree and to pay. Sometimes if you're dealing with a buyer that you know, it's not that complicated. But oftentimes you're dealing with somewhere in a different country, sometimes only by email. So you don't have the face-to-face, you can't get the expressions. Usually people are sincere, sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're playing a game. But even when they're sincere, oftentimes, particularly on the premium, the higher end names, everything's moving very nicely. And then all of a sudden it stops. Well, sometimes it stops because, and the deal still may go through, but it stops because the buyer needs to get another level of approval from the boss or the boss's boss or his or her partners. Sometimes a buyer will try to get a deal set up, but then we'll take 3 weeks to do IP research, trademark issues get looked at. And most lawyers, at least in the States, most lawyers take about 3 weeks to do a thorough analysis. But buyers, I find, don't necessarily tell you, I need 3 weeks now. Now we have a deal, a handshake. I need 3 weeks to do the research. They'll make up different stories. They all go on vacation for a week. That always happens. Traveling, I'm on vacation, my kid's sick, or something else. Um, but you just need to take that into account that you don't necessarily know. The old saying that I remember when I got started in business, I think it still applies, is it's not over till the money's in the bank. And a lot of things can happen even after the contract's signed. So you try to have, I try to tell buyers, I try to tell them, look, I'm straightforward. I'm going to be honest. Be honest with me because I'll make it better for everybody if I understand exactly what's going on instead of playing games. But you don't know all the time. It is something to try to be aware of because if you're working for a seller, your responsibility to the seller is do a great job, best efforts basis, and you want to get the seller accurate information. You don't want to frustrate your seller. Say, okay, we're ready. And then all of a sudden the buyer's not ready and it drags for 2-3 weeks. And the buyer starts coming up with all these questions. But I say, it's not going to happen 100% of the time where you're going to know. But if you do it for a while, you probably get up to like 75, 80% of the time when you can't tell. When it slows down, it's usually, like I was saying, research or funding requiring some partners' approvals. And one of the things that I've seen is with startups or small companies that are working with venture capitalists, these companies might meet once a month to make approvals for acquisitions, but over a certain level, maybe they only discuss those once a quarter. But they don't want to go to their board of directors and say, okay, I'm going to go buy this domain name. The price is X until they know they can get it and what the price is. So they try to line it up. Then they go back to get the approvals. I guess that would pretty much cover most of the cases that I've seen.
Okay, interesting. Um, Actually, are you mentor to other brokers? So, um, if there's a rookie coming to Sedo as a broker, what are the three main principles you can give him on the way or her on the way?
Okay, yeah, I do that a lot. I've been doing that for 16 years, particularly ones that come in that have not had experience in the domain business or experience brokering. The first thing I tell them, which surprises people, is maybe the most important thing is reputation. If you want to stay in the business for a while, reputation is critical. Word of mouth. Um, there's 2,000 brokers in the world. We think about 1,000 are in the U.S. I don't know about Europe. There's several hundred of them, I would think. And of the 2,000, and none of us are licensed. If you're selling real estate or stock or commodities, you have to get a license. So far, domain brokers are not licensed. That may change. So anybody can say, I'm a broker. And maybe they never brokered before. And reputation is very important. The second thing that's very important, I think, is you have to be prepared to work hard. It's not a 9-to-5 job, or if it is, you're going to miss out on a lot of deals. And it's not a 9-to-5 job if you're dealing globally because of different time changes. I'm pretty tired this week because last week I had to get up 4 o'clock in the morning, 4 days to meet with lawyers in Europe. So reputation is very important. Hard work's very important. If you're prepared for that, then I think the next important thing is understanding your buyer, understanding buyers, and understanding your buyer. And that takes time. You really try to put yourself in the buyer or potential buyer's shoes. How is that person thinking? Is it a very motivated buyer? Is it a casual buyer? Is it an experienced buyer? Is it a buyer who's buying out of his own money? Or is it a buyer spending company's money? People behave very differently when you're writing a check from your personal check or you're wiring money out of your funds versus the company's money. You just don't care as much about the company's money. You figure the company has plenty of money. Um, Different strategies, different way to go about communicating with these people. And we never do that. And most of us never do that. I remember, I should be thinking about how the buyer's thinking. But that is something that I spent a lot of time with the younger brokers. And then ultimately, someday they come back and they thank me because it helped them close a couple of deals. They were thinking about it very differently than the buyer. Now, some buyers are very averse to spending money. Some throw it around. Some are gamblers. Some are risk prone. And really trying to understand the psychic of that buyer can come in very handy. So those would be the three things: reputation, work hard, and understand the buyer.
Cool. Okay, this was very detailed. But now the other side, how does a lead is coming to you? Because obviously you need a good set of domain names to work on. And well, I'm also asking the question for myself because I'm in M&A of hosting companies, and maybe I can get some advice from you how to find the leads.
Well, M&A for hosting companies is much more complicated than buying domains. So I'll just handle the domain part. But which is all which what you asked me to do anyway. Finding leads is critical. It's probably the most important thing. Um, you want to understand your buyers, but you also want buyers. So if you're working on a name that you're trying to sell, let's say it's a premium name, 50K or more, it could be into the millions. The premium name, I'm not talking about a $3,000 name, 3,000 euro name. You have several ways to go about it. One is you could broadcast out broadly using social media or perhaps even press releases. But normally, you're going to be better off. It's okay to do that, but it's more important that you reach out in a targeted way into the potential industries or verticals that might want that name. So how do you do that? Well, I know in the US, I'm sure there's comparable publications and tools. Some of they're saying LinkedIn's very, very helpful. Once you have an industry, you go to LinkedIn and you can see who's in the industry. You can get contact information. I like Crunchbase. Um, One thing that I do, which some people can do, but probably not a lot, is I've been around a long time. So I worked in corporate America for a long time and I have a lot of contacts. When I start a search, almost always first thing I do is I contact somebody that I know very high up in the industry, pretty high up in the industry, and just say, look, I'm selling deposits.com or loans.com. So I would call my friend who's actually the number one person at JP Morgan Chase, Jamie Dimon. I'd call him if he took my call. Great. If it's too busy, he'd tell me, talk to somebody else, but ask him who he thought or what banks, if his bank didn't want it, would be a good contact. So now I'm reaching out now to people. It's not a cold call. And if you know people in an industry or people that have sold domains in the industry, you do want to ask them. But that's just like one or two calls. Using the LinkedIn's, the Crunchbases, other databases that are commercially available for a price, for a cost, you can get contact information for different executives, different people, different competitive domain names, and reach out to them by email, by text, by phone. You can also, I guess I work for Sedo, so we've got a database of many millions of buyers. I can go to the database, which I do, and slice and dice it. And we know for the most part which ones purchase or like to purchase domains in certain verticals, certain industries, certain extensions. If it's not .com, what do they buy? And also what the budgets are. So the more information you have about who you think, what group the buyers will be in, the better off you are. However, don't assume you have all the answers, because I can tell you, I've been surprised many times when I thought a big company would be the buyer. And I found that it was somebody that inherited money recently or a startup. And I've had domains, um, sold one today, which won't be announced here, but will be announced right after the conference, to someone here in China. I knew this domain would probably go to China, but it's not often do you know what country it'll go to unless it's very specific for that country. So don't assume that you only have to reach out into one or two countries unless you know for sure. If it's co.uk, you pretty much know where you're going to reach out to. If it's .jp, you're probably going to reach out to Japan. But go with your best bet in terms of the geography, the price ranges, get the names from people that can help you with leads, go to the commercially available databases to get leads, but don't assume that you have it all right. Do some broad stuff too, like social media or press releases or word of mouth.
Okay. You mentioned some larger companies. What a publicly traded company? Is there any difference? How do you sell a domain name, or how do you approach them?
So publicly traded companies, there are a lot of similarities, but there are some differences. One difference is they're going to have more data out there about the company and their people that work there. If you go to their website, you'll see, and this applies to non-public companies too, but more so for public companies, you'll see who their head of marketing is, head of technology, the lawyer, the head of finance. They'll have contact information on the site. There's also public documentation available where you'll get information about who buys domains and who runs certain areas. They'll have a lot of public information about exactly what they're doing. If you want to pitch your domain, take a certain angle, talk about how this particular domain would help them incrementally sell more of certain products. You can see what they're trying to sell, what's been hot for them lately. So it's just a way to get more information, but also everything else equal, public companies are going to be larger. So the decision-making process is more complicated. When you're dealing with one individual, you have a buyer, you have a decision maker you're talking with. The larger the company, the more complex. Decision maker could be the top person, one of the top people, but there are influencers, instigators, I like to call them, and gatekeepers. The influencers have an ear very often to the decision maker. An instigator might just get some excitement going. And the gatekeepers are people that intercept calls and emails to very high level people. I've been at this. I've been at this for a long time. I've been in marketing way before the internet, and back then we didn't have the internet, obviously. So we had to get past the gatekeepers. We had to figure out who to even reach. It wasn't that obvious who to contact. The contact information wasn't around, so you had to go to several different people at once, which worked. If you tried to get to them all at the same time, maybe they start talking with each other, and it would help hype it. With the internet, you have a lot of the tools we've talked about already. You also can go to multiple people in the organization, but you don't necessarily know who your decision maker is until you're well into the process. So you just have to talk to whoever will talk to you from the company.
Okay. So we covered already the regular clients, the publicly listed companies, maybe. And there's as well another class, or actually two classes, which maybe we can put together. That's the marketing agencies, ad agencies. And is there maybe difference as well to brand protection companies? Because I classify them somehow together because they're working for third person, yeah, for clients. So marketing companies, ad agencies, brand protection companies. Where's the right angle there?
They're both tough. The marketing agencies, like advertising agencies, branding companies, yeah, on the one hand, you think, wow, that's great. I can go to them. They might like this domain. They may have a client that likes the domain. The problem is, and most of you are too young to even know that it used to be for many, many years, an advertising agency that would create and place a commercial on TV or do a Yellow Pages ad or a billboard or a newspaper, they would get 15% of the placement. So if the company was spending €1,000,000, the advertising agency would get 150,000 euros. It's a pretty good business. Now it's more like 10%. The problem is they do not get commission for domains. So if you contact an advertising agency, say the agency has a great name for 100,000 euros for your agency, for your client, they're probably not going to recommend it because they're not going to get their 15% or the 10%. They want the money spent on TV or newspaper or even internet like banners or whatever, not domain names. So it's been a real challenge to get them to buy into domain names for clients. It's changing very slowly. When it comes to brand protection agencies, they are they're protecting their clients. They're protecting their clients' domains, and they don't even want you to contact their clients. Sometimes you might be trying to sell a name, and you go to Public Who Is, you look up the domain name, and you see a branding. It's a lander for a branding agency. They might not even own the domain name, but they're there because the client wants you to contact them rather than themselves. I find that when you're trying to sell a domain to a branding agency or through a branding agency, you don't get a lot of cooperation. They're doing their job. They're protecting their client and their name. When you want to sell one of those names for them, then it's different. They will try to get the client to sell it, and they'll ask for 50% of the commission. And a lot of times they do have success because they're protecting the best, most expensive names, the really ultra premium names. And if a broker gets a name to work on and sells it, the branding agency will get 50% from the broker, usually. So the client, is fine. The client's not paying the commission. So it's a little different in both cases. There are a lot of similarities though, because you're not dealing directly with the company that's buying or selling. So you've got those hidden agendas that sometimes you don't.
Okay, cool. So then my last question, which is a little bit more personal. a personal question from me. Do you have still space or room to take over a domain name to broker? Yeah, you are saying yes for me or as well for other clients?
I'm always looking for great domains to broker. Um, literally sold one today. We signed a contract. Okay, it'll be announced at the show. I have to ask him. I don't think I can. Um, but we were working on it for about a week already. And had a very large, not going to be public, a $3 million sale. $3 million, yeah. Last week, I did disclose one for $1 million about 2 weeks ago. That was ZH.com. So every time I sell one or get close to selling one, I'm looking for more. I like to have about 35 or 40 at a time. I think I've got about 29 right now. So definitely. And Sedo has many brokers. I'm not the only broker there. So if it's not for me, it could be for someone else. So we're always happy to help clients sell their domains and also help them buy their domains.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Dave Evanson. These are all my questions. You are around. Whoever has a question to Dave, just approach him. He's looking for nice, good new assets. That's my message here. Thank you very much. Thank you to listen to us.